have been stalled off with promises. Socialism may not be progress, but the threat of the red flag is certainly the inspiring force of all reform. You've got to be sensational to get attention." "Russia is your example of a beneficent violence, I suppose." "Quite possibly," admitted Amory. "Of course, it's overflowing just as the French Revolution did, but I've no doubt that it's really a great experiment and well worth while." "Don't you believe in moderation?" "You won't listen to the moderates, and it's almost too late. The truth is that the public has done one of those startling and amazing things that they do about once in 100 years. They've seized an idea." "What is it?" "That however the brains and abilities of men may differ, their stomachs are essentially the same." The little man gets his. "If you took all the money in the world," said the little man with much profundity, "and divided it up in equal—" "Oh, shut up!" said Amory briskly, and paying no attention to the little man's enraged stare, he went on with his argument. "The human stomach—" he began, but the big man interrupted rather impatiently. "I'm letting you talk, you know," he said, "but please avoid stomachs. I've been feeling mine all day. Anyway, I don't agree with one half you've said. Government ownership is the basis of your whole argument, and it's invariably a beehive of corruption. Men won't work for blue ribbons. That's all rot." When he ceased, the little man spoke up with a determined nod, as if resolved this time to have his say out. "There are certain things which are human nature," he asserted with an owl-like look, "which always have been and always will be, which can't be changed." Amory looked from the small man to the big man helplessly. "Listen to that. That's what makes me discouraged with progress. Listen to that. I can name offhand over 100 natural phenomena that have been changed by the will of man, 100 instincts of man that have been wiped out or are now held in check by civilization. What this man here just said has been, for thousands of years, the last refuge of the associated mutton-heads of the world. It negates the efforts of every scientist, statesman, moralist, reformer, doctor, and philosopher that ever gave his life to humanity's service. It's a flat impeachment of all that's worth while in human nature. Every person over 25 years old who makes that statement in cold blood ought to be deprived of the franchise." The little man leaned back against the seat, his face purple with rage. Amory continued, addressing his remarks to the big man. "These quarter-educated, stale-minded men such as your friend here, who think they think, every question that comes up, you'll find his type in the usual ghastly muddle. One minute it's the brutality and inhumanity of these Prussians. The next it's, we ought to exterminate the whole German people. They always believe that things are in a bad way now, but they haven't any faith in these idealists. One minute they call Wilson just a dreamer, not practical. A year later they rail at him for making his dreams realities. They haven't clear logical ideas on one single subject, except a sturdy, stolid opposition to all change. They don't think uneducated people should be highly paid, but they don't see that if they don't pay the uneducated people, their children are going to be uneducated too, and we're going round and round in a circle. That is the great middle class." The big man, with a broad grin on his face, leaned over and smiled at the little man. "You're catching it pretty heavy, Garvin. How do you feel?" The little man made an attempt to smile and act as if the whole matter were so ridiculous as to be beneath notice, but Amory was not through. "The theory that people are fit to govern themselves rests on this man. If he can be educated to think clearly, concisely, and logically, freed of his habit of taking refuge in platitudes and prejudices and sentimentalisms, then I'm a militant socialist. If he can't, then I don't think it matters much what happens to man or his systems, now or hereafter." "I am both interested and amused," said the big man. "You are very young." "Which may only mean that I have neither been corrupted nor made timid by contemporary experience. I possess the most valuable experience, the experience of the race, for in spite of going to college I've managed to pick up a good education." "You talk glibly." "It's not all rubbish," cried Amory passionately. "This is the first time in my life I've argued socialism. It's the only panacea I know. I'm restless. My whole generation is restless. I'm sick of a system where the richest man gets the most beautiful girl if he wants her, where the artist without an income has to sell his talents to a button manufacturer. Even if I had no talents, I'd not be content to work 10 years, condemned either to celibacy or a furtive indulgence, to give some man's son an automobile." "But if you're not sure—" "That doesn't matter," exclaimed Amory. "My position couldn't be worse. A social revolution might land me on top. Of course I'm selfish. It seems to me I've been a fish out of water in too many outworn systems. I was probably one of the 24 men in my class at college who got a decent education. Still they'd let any well-tutored flathead play football, and I was ineligible, because some silly old men thought we should all profit by conic sections. I loathed the army. I loathed business. I'm in love with change, and I've killed my conscience." "So you'll go along crying that we must go faster." "That at least is true," Amory insisted. "Reform won't catch up to the needs of civilization unless it's made to. A laissez-faire policy is like spoiling a child by saying he'll turn out all right in the end. He will, if he's made to." "But you don't believe all this socialist patter you talk." "I don't know. Until I talked to you I hadn't thought seriously about it. I wasn't sure of half what I said." "You puzzle me," said the big man. "But you're all alike. They say Bernard Shaw, in spite of his doctrines, is the most exacting of all dramatists about his royalties, to the last farthing." "Well," said Amory, "I simply state that I'm a product of a versatile mind in a restless generation, with every reason to throw my mind and pen in with the radicals. Even if, deep in my heart, I thought we were all blind atoms in a world as limited as a stroke of a pendulum, I and my sort would struggle against tradition, try, at least, to displace old cants with new ones. I've thought I was right about life at various times, but faith is difficult. One thing I know, if living isn't a seeking for the Grail, it may be a damned amusing game." For a minute neither spoke, and then the big man asked, "What was your university?" "Princeton." The big man became suddenly interested. The expression of his goggles altered slightly. "I sent my son to Princeton." "Did you?" "Perhaps you knew him. His name was Jesse Ferrenby. He was killed last year in France." "I knew him very well. In fact, he was one of my particular friends." "He was quite a fine boy. We were very close." Amory began to perceive a resemblance between the father and the dead son, and he told himself that there had been all along a sense of familiarity. Jesse Ferrenby, the man who in college had borne off the crown that he had aspired to. It was all so far away. What little boys they had been, working for blue ribbons. The car slowed up at the entrance to a great estate, ringed around by a huge hedge and a tall iron fence. "Won't you come in for lunch?" Amory shook his head. "Thank you, Mr. Ferrenby, but I've got to get on." The big man held out his hand. Amory saw that the fact that he had known Jesse more than outweighed any disfavor he had created by his opinions. What ghosts were people with which to work! Even the little man insisted on shaking hands. "Good-bye," shouted Mr. Ferrenby, as the car turned the corner and started up the drive. "Good luck to you, and bad luck to your theories." "Same to you, sir," cried Amory, smiling and waving his hand. Out of the fire, out of the little room. 8 hours from Princeton, Amory sat down by the Jersey roadside and looked at the frost-bitten country. Nature is a rather coarse phenomenon composed largely of flowers that, when closely inspected, appeared